Hey guys, this is Andy with Jetter Depot. Today we're going to be talking about how to tie your tails and glue your tails onto the end of your liner, whether you're using an inversion tank, cannon, or whatever. Today we're actually doing it on a 2-inch piece of Bravo liner, and we're going to be using a glue tool. I've already got it kind of pre-set up here, but this is a 4-inch liner tool, and so of course we have these in 3s, 2s, 6s, so forth. But yeah, it's basically just some way to emulate the inside of a pipe temporarily, so that we know what this is going to look like when it's blown up to pressure and so forth. So again, we're using the Bravo liner, and you'll see on this particular liner they've got an arrow. I don't know if you guys can see that. But yeah, basically that arrow is pointing to the way that we load it into the drum, so it's also going to be pointing to the tail. What we've done here is we've taken our liner and put it halfway up to the glue tool here, and we've got our caltube. This is a shorter version, but cut at a 45-degree angle. So your liner and your caltube both need to be cut with really nice clean scissors. We don't really want any jagged edges along this or when you're actually cutting the liner, because that can result in a lot of leaks. So what we end up with is something that looks like this. We've got our 2-inch glue tool on the inside here, air regulator on this side going down to our compressor, and we don't really need a whole lot of air. What we really want to make sure of is that we've got about an inch, or somewhere between an inch, inch and a half, somewhere in there on the short side, because again this is cut at a 45. We want this on the short side to have some overlap. We don't want it right here at the edge. So all we're going to do is go ahead and inflate our glue tool to kind of get to have the pipe or the glue tool looking like what the pipe will be in. And what we want to make sure of is that we don't have any kind of jagged edges here, or it's not completely full. So we get a little bit more in here, expand it all the way out, and now what we're going to do is just take our Sharpie, marker, whatever, and we're just going to draw a line where these two meet. This is going to show us exactly where we need to put our glue down when it's time to actually attach it. So this is the first step. We're just going to follow this all the way around. Still see that okay? Okay. Let's see. Alright. So there we go. Once we've got that, we go ahead and deflate. The next thing I want to do is peel this back so you can kind of see where we put that line. When we're peeling this back, we want to be very careful about this small side here. This is the portion that is actually fairly weak, and as if we pull it back, that can tear. So we want to be pretty careful when we get to that portion here. And I'll hold it up in just a second to kind of show you what I'm trying to do here. But we want to make it to where we can actually have glue on the liner itself, on that little red mark I just made, as well as the inside of this caltube. So we're going to put glue here, and we're going to put glue on the inside of that as well. To do that, we're using the Picote branch lining glue. This stuff does not like air, so make sure that when you're done with it, you go ahead and put it right back together. You can end up ruining the whole can if you forget. Let's see if we can get this thing open. We use these kind of brushes. You can probably use a lot of different things, but the main thing to keep in mind is that on the liner portion, this line here, we really want to use a wide stroke. That way, if this doesn't sit perfectly when I set it back down, it doesn't have to be right on the button. It can have a little bit of wobble there and still have a good seal. On the yellow portion, we want to use a thin. So again, here wide, on this side we want to go thin. This glue is incredibly strong. It's kind of an interesting glue, because when I first discovered it, I hadn't really seen any glue like this when I was being shown, but this is actually activated with a heat gun. So what we're going to do is paint this on making sure we don't miss any spots, but it'll actually go on clear, and then as it cures, it starts to get a little cloudy. But yeah, I'll kind of go into that a little bit more, but effectively what we're doing is painting a nice big broad patch on this side, and it generally takes about 15 minutes for this stuff to cure up. You don't really attach it while it's still wet. You let both sides of it actually get nice and hard, and the heat of the heat gun is actually what makes it do its thing. Alright, so we got the wide side here. Now on this one, I'm actually just going to use the other side of the brush, or at least spinning it at 90 degrees. So this, we don't really need too much glue, otherwise you have to hook the truck up to pull this tail back off. So we want to make sure that we've got a nice little bit here. One thing that I'd like to mention is that, again, when you're inside of this portion here, the way that this seam has set up, it's really easy to not get enough glue right on the inside of that seam. So generally what I'll do here is that you see it's already been kind of inverted. I'll go ahead and take my fingers and go ahead and bend it back the other way, basically, just to make sure that it's got a nice even spot to put the glue there. Alright, so we get this all the way down. As it's hardening, you can generally see if you miss a spot. You just got a big hole in it or something. Alright, so we're looking pretty good here. What we'll do next is we're going to let this glue dry, and we'll come back in just a second. Again, it generally takes about 15 minutes, and then we will put this back together, re-inflate, and use the heat gun. I'll show you how to do that. Alright guys, we're back. The glue has taken and dried now, and you can kind of see, I don't know if you can zoom in on that or not, but basically it's a little bit cloudy here when I'm touching it on both sides. It's not coming off on my finger, so now I know that that glue is cured. In the last video, I don't know if you could really quite tell what I was talking about with peeling it back. This side right here is the spot that is actually really easy to kind of tear when you're doing that number. So just as you're pulling it back onto the glue tool, just be really careful again about this section right here. Okay, so now that it's all glued up, what we want to do is, of course, peel it back to where it's supposed to land. So same kind of thing. When we're doing this piece here, it doesn't matter if we get glue on both sides of this line. As you're pulling it back down, it will come back off, but just as before, this piece right here again is still the part that can kind of be in danger. So we want to pull it back down, but we want to make sure that we do that as gently as we can. So now we've got it back down to where we drew our line initially. And also, you know, I don't know if I mentioned it the first time, but you notice that you've got some seams built into this liner, just the way it's laying flat. You've got the same thing on this. So ideally we want to line these up on both ends when we're taking and drawing our line, filling it up and all that. Okay, so we're back here again. Let me turn that down a little bit. These glue tools, by the way, do have a blowout in them, like this right here. So even if you were to overinflate it, it will automatically reset itself. I think it's about 15 or 17 psi where it'll blow. Okay, so now we're just going to take and inflate this again, and we want that to sit just where we drew the line. So it takes a little bit of adjusting, and don't worry if you have to do that a couple of times to get it to lay right. This one cooperated, but just like before when we were taking and drawing our lines, we don't want any kind of ripples or waves here. We want to make sure it's inflated enough that the caltube is tight around that, just like it would look inside the pipe. We're simulating all of that here. All right. Now that the glue has been dried, we've got our stuff back in the spot here. We're going to use our heat gun. Now, you know, I've been asked what temperature and how much air and all that. Honestly, it doesn't really matter as much as you might think. What we're going to try to do is I generally leave this about in the middle. I generally use low heat. And what I like to feel for is about this height. Yes, I should feel it, but it shouldn't be burning and scalding. Obviously, the Dartex coating here is plastic. This right here is a plastic too, so we don't want to get too crazy with it. But about a foot away, you should feel some sort of heat. But that's what we're looking for. So we let the whole thing heat up, and then literally all I'm doing is going down from the yellow towards the white, and with my thumb I'm going to be kind of pushing any potential air bubbles out. I'll generally go around the whole thing twice, and I'm just pushing. Can you see that from where we're at here? Okay. So all I'm doing is going about a foot over and pushing it down as I spin the whole thing around. That's really all there is to it. You do have a seam, obviously, on the caltube. You see this right here? Sometimes that can kind of bend up, and you'll have to put a little bit of glue in there or use a little extra heat to push it back down. But that's what we want to make sure is the whole thing is nice and flat. Alright, so I'm just going to continue going around, and what I really want to make sure is that I'm not seeing any kind of blackened marks where I'm too close to the liner. And at the very end we'll do the little fingernail test, because if I can take and peel any of this yellow back off of the liner itself, then I either did not put enough glue, I didn't use enough heat. It could be a couple of things, but it would be something that you would want to take and touch that up. Most little small compressors, when you're taking and actually doing the lining, can keep up with a small leak, but again, we're going for it to look perfect, so that's what we're trying to do. So again, I'm just taking my thumb and kind of pushing everything this way. I just want to make sure it's laid down nice and tight. And once I feel like I've got all of it exactly where I want it to be, and I feel pretty confident about it, we'll set this down, and then we'll go back and try to test it. And all I'm really doing here is just taking a fingernail and trying to kind of peel it back. If I can peel that back at all, then like I said, we didn't have enough glue, we didn't have enough heat, something. So this is all looking pretty good. Yep, so we're good to go there. So now the tail is on. You know, obviously we've already gotten our measurement when we were taking and measuring the line to begin with as we were prepping. The next step that we're going to do in the next video is basically wetting it out. Again, this is the 2-inch glue tool. So same setup as the 4, just smaller. But yeah, this is what we're left with. So when it comes off, you'll see that it does have some wrinkles here. Again, that's because it was just inflated to 2 and it came back down again. But that's okay, as long as we're not gluing it in this space, because then when you try to expand it into the pipe, then you can get some leaks. That's why we want to use the glue tools to get it set exactly where it's going to look when you're installing it. So this is what you should look like. You got a tail right there on the end. I've had some people who use a smaller tail like this. What you can find when you do this is the way that you have to tie it. Sometimes the resin will push up towards the knot here if it's too short, and when you're trying to pull this tail off, it can be a debacle. So I would probably go with a tail at least this long. I've even used longer, 4 feet even, if needed. So that's generally in a bigger pipe. But yeah, if you can do this on a 2-inch, you can do it on a 3, do it on a 4, certainly a lot easier. But yeah, next video we'll wet this out. I'll show you how to tie it, and then the last video, we may put it all into one, I'm not sure yet, and then the last video we'll shoot it through the Canon, kind of give you an idea. Alright, thanks guys. Alright guys, back again, where we're taking and wetting out the liner that we just did our tail on. So I've got this set up with the Smart Roller. We've got a 2-inch liner holder to make it a little bit easier. This process, it doesn't hurt to have extra people helping you on any of it, but this is something you could do solo if you really wanted to. At this point, everything we've done up until this point isn't really time sensitive. Once we take and mix this resin, that's when everything starts to kind of be in a time crunch, of course. So at this point, we want to make sure that the line that we're shooting is nice and clean, all the branches going to it, same thing if we have to reinstate. We want to make sure that, what I like to do is go ahead and measure out my resin, and before I mix it, I'm just got it all together. Today we're using one that's our house resin. This is 4:1. So on a 2-inch Bravo liner, you're using right at 1/4 pound per foot. So compared to say 4-inch Bravo liner, at least the 3.5 mil stuff is right around 0.8 pounds per foot. So what that leads me into is the thickness of your liner and what your setting is going to be on your roller. So this particular liner is 2 mil thick. So when we double that over, we're at 4. Because of this Dartex coating, I generally add another mil. So we're looking right at 5 mil for this. I generally will have this set up and open. And when I'm filling this up, I like to have a little spot here for the resin slug to kind of catch up. This end over here, if I can, I like to set it up a little bit higher, but it's not a huge thing. We'd either have a guy do that or find some place to set it up. So what I generally do is I'll mix my hardener into my resin. We make sure that we stir this up before we measure it all out, the hardener that is, and then we get it all going. So here we go. We're basically going to mix, go ahead and tie the tail. I'll show you how to do that, and then we'll probably just go run over and shoot it because we're all set up for that anyway. But here we go. So once I'm pouring this in, this is a 60-minute work time. We should have plenty of time to do this, but that's going to be at about 60 degrees or so. So as it starts getting hotter and hotter, our work time actually goes way down a bit. So you can use, obviously if it's a big long line, you can use your paint stirrers in your bucket. For the stuff we do here, we can generally get away with just doing something like this and shaking it. I like to use a little digital scale. Obviously you can use whatever works for you guys. Alright, so that's the color, basically what we're looking for. Looking pretty good. And we'll go ahead and put this all in. That might be maybe too much. We'll find out. Alright. I like to leave this last portion here white because that's going to take and allow me to fold it over. And we're using the Canon, but the same thing for your regular inversion drums too. So I'll go ahead and move all this down past here. Go ahead and lock it in. And this is designed to run with a drill here. So I'm going to let all the air come out here. And if you'll remember, when we were taking and doing our gluing, we left a little bit of this liner inside of the tail. So what we want to make sure that we do is that we don't just stop right here at the end. We want to make sure that we've got enough in here. So you can look down into the tail to do that. You can honestly just kind of feel it in there a little bit too. So we'll go ahead and come on out with it. And once I get to about right there, I generally want to take, because I don't really want my roller to kind of pinch off my tail as it gets a little bit thicker there, of course. But once I've got this all into here, I'll go ahead and take the rest of it and kind of just do this number. You can see if I still see white right here, we're no good. We got to make sure it's completely wet out, of course. So I might take and roll this down one more time. Get the slug on the right side here. Alright, off we go. Now we got a good bit of air out of there, all the blues to the end. And again, the last thing I like to do is to make sure that, you know, any of this extra resin gets all the way to the end. So we like to look down here, make sure we're not seeing any white of that liner. Looking good. This is also a point where you can tell if you got any leaks. If you start getting resin on your hands, then you do. Looks like we did pretty good though. Alright. So, for those that don't know, you know, when we're rolling out a really big long line, what we don't really want is to have a whole bunch of this lining like this. So what we really want to make sure is that this kind of sits off to the side, right? So the thicker that resin is, the faster it'll heat up. Okay, so now we're done with our funnel. Let's go over here and tie our tail. So again, we try to set this out to where it's not going to heat up too fast. Again, if you're doing this out in the sun, we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves as plenty of time as we got as it starts to heat up. Okay, so first step. Can you see all this? Yeah? Okay. So the first step we do is I'll take and put half of a tape here. This is actually Gorilla duct tape, but I prefer actually to use the cheap stuff, really thin stuff, because everything's got to fit through this nozzle. This is the one for the cannon, or even if we were using it for an inversion drum, we want to make sure that everything, the knot we're doing, the rope, all of that's going to have to go through here. And again, if you can do this on a 2-inch, you'll certainly be able to do it on others as well, the bigger stuff. All right, so again, I want to get all the air out of there, and then all I'm going to do is fold that over. So we've got it folded on both sides. Now that's not going to take and keep, you know, hold it, but that's just a starting point. Next thing we do is, again, you see this little seam here? What I'm going to do is end up folding 1, 2, so like a trifold, and then I'll actually fold it one more time. So it's going to end up looking like that. That's the thickness that we're going for to take and make our tie, but I really don't want any yellow on it. I don't want my rope to be on that. I don't want my little zip ties on there. So the next thing I do is, once I get it to this point, is I take my other tape here and go ahead and basically just protect the caltube from going too crazy. Now, again, if we have, you know, wraps on tops of wraps with this, you start to develop thicker and thicker as we go. So I'd really only do about, you know, 1 or 2 wraps. You can get a little bit more than that when you use the thinner stuff, but really the idea is just to keep it as thin as possible. Again, for the reasons of going through the nozzle. All right, so grab our tail again. All right. All right. Alright, so now all the yellow is covered up, right? So the next step we want to do is take our string. This is a 1/2-inch mule tape. And so our liner here is about 6 feet. We're putting it into a 5-foot pipe, which I know is a little excessive, but I kind of wanted you guys to be able to see how it comes out. But based on the length of my liner, I've got to make sure that this string is longer still, because I want to make sure that the string isn't going to hold it from inverting, and I also have enough to kind of wrap it up and pull the tail out once it's cured. So my liner's 6 foot. This is probably around 10 feet. So I'd add 4 or 5 feet to whatever you're doing. So on one end, we want to do a figure-8 knot. This is the knot that I prefer. So we're just starting here, wrapping that up, and most guys are fairly familiar with this overhand knot. You're just doing a single knot like that. This figure-8 knot is pretty similar. You're just adding one more wrap to it and then coming through so that you actually see a figure-8 in there. Very strong knot. So yeah, and if you want to, you can take and come and cut this little guy off here if you're concerned about it. I generally don't, but anything you can do to make it smaller, I guess. All right. So now what we want to do is we're going to basically fold this over. Now we're going through, again, a 2-inch line, so the smaller this knot is, the better. If we were going through something like a trap, we would probably want to take and make it smaller still, because it's got to be able to make those turns. So depending on what you're shooting and how many bends is where I'll take and adjust this size-wise. But just for today, to kind of get the general idea, I'll do something like that. So we're going to take our knot, put it through here, and again, we want this to be as small and as tiny as possible. So the next step we're going to use is, this is the banding tool from Pacote. It's basically a stainless steel zip tie. So what we do is put these guys on. And when I'm putting these on, I really want them to be the edge here right on the side. I feel like it has a less of a chance to cut the liner or the actual caltube as it's coming through. So I generally put them on by hand to that point. Then I put it in here where I feel like, all right, I'm probably going to break it. Then I just turn it 90 degrees and finish it off. That gives us a nice, real clean end here, and certainly very strong. So I'll go ahead and put a second one on. And I generally will put it on the same side as far as the connection. All right, so there's one and then two. Same kind of thing. That's what we're looking for. All the way until it feels like it's about to break. Here, turn it 90 and let it go. All right. So that's what the end looks like, but these are still sharp enough that they can take and cut the caltube, cut the liner itself. So we want to take our last little bit of tape here, and we're going to just cover that up to make sure that that piece is covered. This is why, again, I like to use that thin tape, because as you start to wrap this up more and more, it starts to get a little bit thicker. We should still be fine here, but that's the reason that I do it that way. All right. Okay, so this is what we're looking like, and this is pretty much ready to load into our cannon. I take it off of the holder here, and I generally will just leave that white, you know, because that's again going on to the actual nozzle. So now that the tail is done, what we'll do, and this is right before we load it into the cannon, again, or drum, but I'll put this through, the string will go through, and then I want to just make sure that, again, on this coating, you'll see this when you're putting it on the glue tool, but certainly when you're putting it on here too, we don't want that coating to not quite get over the lip. If it's just the actual textile, that's no good. It's not going to hold the air. So generally coming in through here, I'll kind of give it a little bit of extra stretch, and then down and around. Again, we just want to make sure that that coating goes all the way through. You see we've got our rope in there as well. And we can take and put this on. Where's my little driver? Some people will actually take and before they put on, you know, on the nozzle, this is a 4-inch, but they'll take and put like electric tape here. And so that when you pull this down tight, you're going to lose a little bit of air on either side of this flat. Certainly a lot better than a circular rope. But yeah, you can put a little bit of electric tape on there, and that'll take and cut some of that down. But it's not really needed, I have found. Just a personal preference thing. All right, so pretty snug right there. Next thing that you can use is, we use soap here because we just have it, but I have heard a lot of people prefer mineral oil. But all we're really trying to do at this point is to keep this nice and slick when it goes into the cannon. We want to make sure that it is super slick and it's going to invert and not get caught on itself or anything else. All right. So what I'll do here is I just spray the whole thing down with soap, both sides. Again, this is something you can do solo. Having a buddy help you out, I think, is pretty beneficial. I will make sure I get the actual knot too, and not just the blue liner or just the tail, but I want to really get everything. So this is now ready to load up. We can go over here to the cannon. And Santino, if you wouldn't mind helping me out and grab that cannon up for me. Guys, Santino's another one of our trainers. Brian's behind the camera, but all of us are happy to help you out. We'll just straight up and down. Yeah, one thing I really like to do is I want to make sure that, you know, I'm not getting, when I'm loading it, a whole lot of this. You know, I want this to be nice and straight. But I really want to make sure that rope is what goes in there first. So I'll load that, make sure the rope is down at the bottom, and then I'll just adjust my whole thing to make sure that I don't have this wrapped around or twisted or whatever. And again, I want to make sure that it's, you know, nothing's getting caught as I'm going in there. All right, so we're going to lock this 3 down. The idea with Bravo liners specifically, and all liners are a little bit different, and even the resin that you're using, so you need to know what products you're using and how you're doing it. But Bravo specifically wants to go in there really slow because it can stretch. So your inversion pressure for Bravo should be as low as possible. I've heard even 1 psi or 2, but the curing pressure for Bravo is 5 to 7. You generally don't have an issue blowing off the tail until you get to about 10 or 15 psi, but those are the magic numbers when it comes to Bravo liner. All right, thanks, sir. We're all hooked up over there. One thing I'll do is close this valve down and go ahead and preset my pressure to say 5. That's what I'm supposed to be curing at. I don't really want to invert it at that, but I'm going to just adjust it with here, and the whole idea is just for this to move as slowly as possible. Again, this pipe is shorter than what this liner is, but I'm hoping that you'll see as it goes out on that end, you know, what that inversion process looks like if you haven't ever seen it before. So we'll put this right up here to the edge and see what we can do. Alright, so again, we're wanting this to go in really slow, and I'm just kind of looking at the liner as it's moving. I think I turned it back down again. Let's see. There we go. Alright, so presetting it, then I'm just going to use my, my valve here to kind of get it moving. So again, the slower the better. Alright. So that's what we're looking for. And then, again, we knew this was a little bit longer, but I'm going to open this up a little bit and take it to about 7. Alright? You see how that's stretching? See how that's pulling out the end over there? That goes to show you that Bravo liner can be stretched. Not always a good thing, but it's a very flexible liner, and it'll certainly go around lots and lots of bends. A lot of people like to use it for 2-inch for that reason. But there's other stuff. There's Top Flex and fiberglass, and you know, Bravo works really, really well though, for whatever that's worth. So again, I'm at about 6 psi right now. I can generally take and cut this off. Another thing that you can do is, now that you're at this point, you could go ahead and turn your pressure down, let it deflate, right? Take this off, take your cannon off, and there's a couple of different ways that you could take. You still got your regulator right here. Give me one sec. And you can use a fast cap. What's already on this. So this comes with the cannon. So you could hook this up, tighten that back down, and go ahead and let it roll. And then you can move on to your next line, or you could use a curing cap. These are really designed for the cannon. This you could use with a regular inversion. So you would just unscrew this, put that back on, and it's the same general idea. This is just a basic 2-inch curing cap. So let's see if we can use this, if it will get back on there. Let's see what that looks like. But that's just the general idea, is to take and, you know, you can leave the cannon on there. That works just fine. But the fast cap works too. Let's just try that for the video purposes. Obviously, we'd want this to be completely tightened down, just for time's sake. Let's see how that does. All right, there you go. Now we're lining. So again, depending on your resin, depending on how long it's going to take and cure, but once it's all said and done and this hardens up, we take and we pull that tail off, and what you're left with is, you know, the pipe to be lined perfectly. As you can see, this is why we want to make sure that we've got the exact right distance. If we had too many holes on the bottom end of this pipe that we just covered up that we didn't really have to, now we got to reinstate those. So all about measuring on the front end. Anyway, guys, I hope this makes a lot of sense to you. If you got any questions on any of these steps, from the gluing of the tail to wetting it out, shooting, you can certainly give any of us a call here, and we'll be happy to help you out. That's 866-5-JETTER. Thanks so much.